This is going to be a pretty casual, just top of my head thoughts kind of video because I've been thinking a lot about the sustainability of being an actor and certainly the sustainability of being in the entertainment industry. I think a lot of people have been thinking about that. And this year, more than any other year, I've had a lot of conversations with people about getting out of the industry. And it makes sense. I mean, in some ways, it feels like we had our little .com bubble and it burst. And less shows are being ordered, and certainly less shows are happening here in Los Angeles. I saw some statistic that it was like 60% down, which is terrifying. And it's a combination of so many factors, you know. Someone asked me the other day if the strikes caused it, and I said, no, I think they just sped it up. And I think that's kind of the general consensus, is that things were already waning, and then the strikes just gave everybody an excuse to accelerate the outsourcing and find tax incentives other places and order shorter seasons and all these kinds of things. Which doesn't mean that the strikes are a bad thing. I mean, I think unions have to fight for their members, and kind of a rock and a hard place situation, honestly, because you can say all you want that this wouldn't have happened if we hadn't struck, but we don't know that because we don't get to live that timeline. But regardless, it's like the overwhelming conversation in Los Angeles this year seems to be, do we get out or not? And my husband and I both work in the industry, and so it feels really tenuous this year. Like, do we stay with most of our livelihood anchored in the industry, or do we try to get out or try to establish another career path so that we feel like there's more possibilities for our lives in the future? But a lot of this talk about sustainability really has me questioning the overarching stability and sustainability of getting paid to be a storyteller, period. When I think about acting, I think about that phrase in The West Wing they would say over and over again, I serve at the pleasure of the president. And I think about that a lot with my art. Like, I serve at the pleasure of my art. I serve at the pleasure of whatever you want to say, like my calling or my vision for my life. Because of that, it feels like earning a living isn't a guarantee. I remember reading, this was years ago, about the sort of bohemian art movement, and I don't know what time period it was because I'm not a historian, but they were talking about how artists from sort of the origins of that word bohemian struggled between wanting to make enough to eat and feeling like if they made enough to eat, they had sold out, because it meant they sold their art. And art wasn't meant to be consumed. And we're now in a position, like as a society, where we seem to assume that art is meant to be consumed, and that the way to prove that you're a valid artist is to have your art consumed en masse. But I feel like that is just, we're getting into so much trouble there, right? Because art that is consumed en masse these days seems to be largely corporate, meaning driven by a studio or a larger company with shareholders and profit in mind. Artists want, I think, in their heart of hearts, to explore and dive deep and understand something and spend probably more time in exploration than is financially wise. And so instead, you know, exploration is expedited and the art ends up feeling more shallow and more corporate. And so I'm not saying that it's mutually exclusive, that you can either have art or you can have profit. There's this heyday we've had where actors have been paid a lot to do what they do, and I think as an industry we've sort of come to expect it and come to assume that that's the right way to do things. What I'm not saying is that actors should get poor while corporations get rich. That's not what I'm saying. But I just don't know if it's possible to do this entertainment industry thing and have working actors like myself make a living. I mean, the market is more fragmented than it's ever been. And so, you know, I when making indie film, would sometimes tell the people I produce for, like, imagine all of these pots, right, where you have audience members. And before, it was like we'd have these massive vats of audience members that could hold millions at a time. So you just had to try and get your product in front of that, like, vat of 20 million, 50 million, whatever, I don't know the numbers, audience members. And now we have, instead of a vat, we have all these little pots everywhere, and they're like, oh, I can fit, 100,000 here and 1 million there and 2 million there. And it's harder to monetize that kind of thing. And if it's harder to monetize, it means it's harder to pay the artist to make the thing. And it's harder to raise the money to pay the artist to make the thing. And so it sort of is this loop of financial hardship that I'm not really sure how to get out of. We can bemoan the sort of death of the mid-range movie, I mean, it seems now there's either the really cheap stuff or there's the $250 million blockbuster. Regardless, it's a huge, it's a sea change, I think, in the way that we view art, see art, and thus the way that we view the artist and see the artist. But expecting wages to like increase as time goes on, growth year over year, when we're seeing such an incredible foundational shift in the way that we engage with content, I don't understand this debate, And maybe I'm mishearing the debate, but as an actor who's been in this industry for the last, I've been in LA for 16 years, but I've been acting for about 10. I've witnessed actually quite a few shifts, which is wild in 10 years. And I hear people talking about the good old days as if they should return, and they can't, you can't put everything back in Pandora's box, right? So I guess my question for myself and for, if there's any actors watching and any filmmakers watching, I guess is, can we have a question about sustainability that marries financial and artistic stability and sustainability? And I just don't know that we can. In the sense that, like, it used to be you book a pilot and that could pay you a lot for the year, or you book a show and then you could, if you invested it wisely, who knows, you could probably live off of that for a long time, And now if I were to say book a series regular in something, I might just be good for the year and be sort of living year to year, unless I wanted to like scrimp and save, which I would do. I do like being frugal, but it's a different economic profile entirely. It's a different economic reality. And so I don't know that we can talk about artistic stability and financial stability on a level with each other and expect one industry to fulfill both. It would be lovely, but I don't think that that's the world we live in anymore. And so I, as an artist, have been trying to figure out how to make my life financially stable outside of the arts for like 10 years. Really, since I booked my first TV gig and realized, oh, this isn't the golden ticket I thought it would be. Like, I really had thought, like, you book a TV show and then you could potentially, if you played your cards right, be set. And the experience instead was like, book a TV show and crickets, and also very much not set. I've been trying to figure this out for a decade now, and what I've come to is just a series of side hustles. And I know that that's not an attractive thing to do, is to have 3 side hustles instead of one core job. I suppose on some level I enjoy it, although lately I've been looking for more steady work and wondering if an hourly paycheck would feel better than cobbling together a series of side hustles. Over the last 10 years, I've been separating the question of financial stability from the question of artistic stability. And I think it helps. I think it's helped me, at least, to not have my work in the industry have to hold the weight of also supporting me. But like, acting has paid me enough to supplement my husband's income so that we can have a good life. But it hasn't been enough to be like, oh, we're good, And so I've been wondering if maybe having something hourly would be better. And I've had a lot of artistic stability in the last couple of years without the financial. I've been craving the financial, but potentially if I got the financial stability, maybe I'd lack the artistic stability and everything would start to become too corporate and easy and formulaic. I don't know. And then, maybe I'm getting too big picture with it, but I think a lot about how we talk about security and stability as if they're like givens and that we should have them as human beings. And I look back on the entire history of the known world, and when has stability ever been on the table? Like, Mother Nature's always just there, like earthquakes, volcanoes, storms. and we never know when our hour will come. I wonder if this sort of age of comfort we've been living in, and relative comfort, obviously there are oppressed communities and there are wars and everything, but having phones in our hands, having, processed food available, I wonder if this has created this idea that comfort is a given when, if you look at the animal kingdom and life as a whole, is any being comfortable? The cat certainly isn't, and that's why she's making that sound. So maybe we're having the wrong conversation. Like maybe instead of sustainability, the question is more about evolution. An art form that, as it grows and goes through its evolution, that it continues to grow in a way that prolongs life. Whether or not that means that life is comfortable, is the evolution helping the organism survive, or is it killing it? Maybe that is the conversation we're having as an industry. Like, are the evolutions we're seeing in the last 10, 15 years, are they killing the industry? Or are they helping it grow? And then if they are killing the industry, what's coming up in its place? I suppose you could assume that generally speaking, the organisms that survive are the ones that are able to. And maybe this industry is not able to in the way that it used to. It's sort of a shocking thing to have entered an industry when I was younger and have wanted to enter an industry for so long that no longer exists now that I'm here and trying to be a part of it. Rather than bemoan what used to be that I was never a part of, I'm more wondering, what are we building now, and what is it fair to ask of that new world? And I'm not sure. Anyway, it'd be interesting to hear folks' thoughts about this, because this is a big question, and whether or not you're thinking about getting into the industry or thinking about getting out of it. It's a very interesting time to be here, so I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences.